everybody. We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
And I'm Dr. Kristen.
Welcome to today's Good Doctors Diagnose, middle of September, Wednesday, September 16th. And for today's joint discussion, we've had a couple of things happen over the last few days that have brought to our attention the real necessity of building and maintaining communities while we're all in isolation. And that looks like very different things for depending on your interests, where you are in the world, what you see as community. But we see a lot of relevance for this kind of remote work culture that we're living in right now. So we just wanted to share some of our thoughts and feelings about how we build community and why we need community.
So one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that community is something that requires work and building. Often communities are kind of proximity buckets. And so you assume you're in a community because you spend time with people, but there's still quite a lot of work involved in that, whether it's work by you as a participant or work by the crafters of the space. And there's still quite a lot of engagement. And what's happening now is what we've done is strip away the proximity, the power of proximity. And so now for everybody, community requires some level of effort, some level of work. And so it's not quite as intuitive as it was before. And we see this especially for like people managers in remote working, like what does this look like, and how GitHub is kind of known as the world leader in remote working because they've actually never had an office. They've worked remote this whole time. And they have a whole guidebook of intentional ways to craft community. And it is long and involved because it has to be. It's not just something that you can say, hey, let's all get a happy hour once a week. Like that's not how you build community. It requires creating places for vulnerability. It requires creating places for play. It requires creating places for all the things that community kind of biologically ticks in us and gives us that way. So there's excuse me, people have always formed communities around a couple categories of things, but the most relevant to this discussion is shared interests. And we have 3 examples of ways that people have done that in the last little bit. And the first one is one that we both mutually participated in, which is these days kind of rare for us. It's not rare when we're in person. We take in theater a lot together. We take in live music a lot together. But this is almost the longest we've been apart. We're getting real close.
We're getting close, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is pretty close, if not there. And so
2013 would have been longer, but only by a couple months.
Only by a couple weeks, I think, actually. So this year. And so we've talked about how to do this. So we tried a book club. That didn't really work for us. We've tried watching movies together, and that wasn't quite the same. It didn't feel the same. But then on Sunday night, the cast of The Princess Bride, which is one of both of our mutual favorite movies, did a very low-tech, adorably cheap reading of the original script.
Oh my gosh.
And it wasn't just us. There was 100,000 people watching it. But what for us in particular was really fun was not only the fact that, like, as we were saying the lines to our screens in our own homes on each side of Pennsylvania, and 100,000 other people were doing it, we got to experience it together. And so not only did we get community with a larger 100,000 people that all love this movie, but we got to build something between the two of us that we hadn't had a chance to in a while. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and it was such a great reminder of how you can build that community around shared experiences and shared interests. And it doesn't have to be a weekly thing or, every Wednesday we're gonna build community. But to have it kind of happen organically in this way was such a great reminder of what that feels like, that I had, it hasn't happened a lot in the last 7 months for me. And I know for Dr. Kristen as well. And so it was such a great reminder that, sometimes it is these it was planned, it wasn't spontaneous, but more organic kind of get-togethers that can bring a lot of people together. And it was so fun to see everybody watching on Twitter and to know that my cousin in Bed-Stuy was watching, and several of my friends in Pittsburgh I didn't know were watching but commented on my Facebook post about it. And just to build community in those small ways was really important for both of us, I know.
Yeah. And then the one that for me personally has been really important throughout this process especially is an online platform called Discord, which is if you work in an office, you've probably heard of Slack these days. And Discord is Slack for socializing, is kind of the way that I say it. It's used a lot by gamers because you can live stream your gaming platform and talk to people while you're gaming. But it's also used a lot for people in certain fandoms. So there's a huge Supernatural fandom presence on Discord. There's a huge Marvel fandom, Buffy, Star Trek, kind of all the big ones are very, very active on Discord. And for me, what this means is that I'm spending most of my days being able to check in with people all around the world who admittedly don't know all of me. They don't know my legal name. They don't know my legal job. Like, there is a lot of online discretion that I practice for sure, but we have enough shared interests that for 20 minutes a day, I can talk about this comic book I just read and, you know, get really, really nerdy about it with people. And that feeds the kind of like, we used to have book clubs. We used to have water cooler conversations. We used to have all that kind of stuff. And I get to do it through Discord. As well, too, there's a lot of events in fandom for people who aren't a part of a fandom. You may not know that, but it's not just conventions. We tend to, as fandoms, do a lot of fundraisers. So like Supernatural has raised, I think, something close to, in its 15-year run, something close to $500,000 for various charities around the world. Marvel, events that I'm directly involved with Marvel, where we're hitting $100,000. For things like rainforest conservation and literacy projects and the Equal Justice Initiative and things like that, and people creating in community together and figuring out ways to raise money, which is another really important aspect of community, is a shared interest and also a shared goal. And so having those kind of things together really kind of brings people together, which is another reason why there are a lot of offices that like to do weight loss challenges, which we really hate. But the impetus behind that, kind of a shared goal together, a shared activity together, can be really important. We would encourage you to not do it around something to do with people's bodies. But having something like that can be very, very important to community building activities.
That's right. And the community that's been really important to me during this period of isolation brings in another aspect of community building as well, which is mental and physical health, and whatever that looks like for you, and however you can possibly build a community around that. And, you know, Dr. Kristen talked about the importance of a global community and maintaining that connection to the world outside of us. But my yoga community here in Pittsburgh is a really localized community. The classes were all in person up until our stay-at-home order in March. And thankfully, my yoga instructor taught herself Zoom and has held the classes on Zoom ever since. And it's been a really important part for me to maintain a sense of schedule, to understand what day it is if I have yoga class. But to know that I'm taking that time for myself with people who have that shared interest. And a shared philosophy on our mental and physical health is another really important part to just surviving, honestly, especially in this period of isolation. And we haven't really seen each other in person in a long time, but, you know, every Tuesday and Thursday, I see my yoga friends, and we have those shared experiences. And for me, it's been helpful to think about, you know, that they've gone on this isolation journey with me in Pittsburgh. And we know we've all kind of gone through the same process together and been able to share that, even if it's just showing up on our yoga mat twice a week. So those are all the things that are really important philosophical parts of building community that we've touched on, that we would really encourage you, especially as, you know, I think right when shutdown started to happen, everyone went on Zoom and we were really consistent about happy hours and get-togethers and all that kind of stuff. But the longer this isolation continues, you know, the more important it is to really think intentionally about ways that we can build a community that are meaningful maybe not always, every Thursday, but ways that really build community in those key areas that we've talked about in terms of personal development and shared interests and play, the importance of play and having fun as opposed to nonstop Zoom meetings. So we really hope our communities have given you some insight into what your professional and personal communities can look like. But we had a couple of events happen over the last 4 days where we were like, you know what? This is an important thing to talk about with our friends on our YouTube channel.
So that's it from us. And we will see you next week.
Take care, everybody.